Hi everyone, my name is Ingrid Arboin from Clan Mother Worldwide, and today I'm going to do something unusual. I don't usually talk about national charts, but I thought there's a lot of stuff going on in Canada, and I've kind of heard people asking American astrologers a lot of questions about Canada, and they don't really have answers. So because I'm in Canada, I thought I would do a video looking at the national chart. I'm also going to look at Justin Trudeau's chart and see how it ties in with what's going on. Because this June 10th eclipse is going to be hitting the chart exactly. So let's put on the glasses, let's take a look. So the first chart I'm going to bring up is Justin Trudeau's chart, and we're going to look at it in terms of the transits that are going on, and I have it set to the eclipse on June 10th. So on the inside circle you will see that there is a Justin Trudeau's chart, and on the outside you can see that we have the eclipse. So the eclipse is at here 19 degrees of Gemini, and it will be opposing Justin Trudeau's, oops, I should go back here and fix that, Justin Trudeau's chart right opposite this Jupiter. So this is Jupiter, and it is in Sagittarius. So what does it mean when you have Jupiter in Sagittarius, as he does, and it's in the 4th house? So generally this means that Justin has a lot of support, wealth, and a lot of inheritance from the family. So this usually comes up in families who are in a person who has some lineage with money and wealth. And in Sagittarius, it also indicates some belief systems that sort of he has adopted and brought into his world. Now you can see he's also got Neptune and Mercury there in Sagittarius. So he has some very strong family-related belief systems. And I believe Justin Trudeau was also a teacher to begin with, so there's some teaching within him. Sagittarius is the teacher. So I did have a couple of instances where I crossed Justin Trudeau's path. One of those times was when he came to the Yukon, and I took a video. So I'll show you a little bit of the video clip, and you can really see that Jupiter playing out in that clip.
Because I realized that the conversations I had with Canadians all my life were pretty special. Because when people met me and find out who my dad was, they didn't want to talk about hockey or the weather or, anything other than Canada. And I got to be the recipient of amazing conversations about community, about friendship, about the future of our country. And I was just a kid, a teacher, and going to be a teacher and all those things, but I love talking to people, and I got to hear people's dreams for this country. And for me, everywhere I go, every time I get to gather with people, I reflect on the conversations that brought me to this place right now, and the place of responsibility and service that I have now. And I want to say thank you.
Okay, so that was Justin Trudeau, and you can see how he is, he has a lot of vision and a lot of ideas. And in that video, he really does demonstrate that he really, politicians say things, but you get the sense that he has a vision and a belief and really loves Canada and wants to take Canada in the right direction. Now, with the eclipse opposing his Jupiter, this is a bit of a tension. It throws a bit of a loop. Eclipses are always surprise. They seem like surprises. They're always building. And then when things sort of come to a head at an eclipse, and things change all of a sudden, you're like, oh, how did I not see that coming? But that's kind of how they work. It's like, wow, something just like, there will be a breakup and you're like, oh my God, I didn't see that coming, but you kind of saw it, you saw it coming. So this is kind of the energy that the eclipse will bring. And the interesting thing is that this eclipse will be kind of the only place that it will be seen is parts of Canada, up through the Arctic Circle and into Russia. So it's doing this weird kind of very early in the morning. So if you're in Toronto, maybe Ottawa, but definitely in Toronto, you'll be able to see the eclipse when the sun is rising right on the horizon. So I actually think that would be very cool. So if anybody has a camera, please take some pictures. Make sure that you have eclipse glasses when you're looking at the sun, especially at that time in the morning. It can damage your eyes. So anyways, we have this eclipse, and right beside the eclipse is Mercury, and squaring the eclipse is Neptune, which is here, and Neptune has been squaring Justin Trudeau's Jupiter, and it started this year. It will continue throughout the year and into next year. It's a very slow transit, and it goes back and forth, and generally Neptune will hit a particular planet 4 or 5 times. So it's a very slow moving outer planet. But what Neptune does when it squares Jupiter is there's a bunch of things. It can make you preoccupied with some sort of ideal. It can make you think that you have no limitations, because Jupiter is that expansive, and especially in Sagittarius, no limitations in terms of your ideologies and your beliefs and so on. It can kind of bring in this foolish overconfidence. And because Neptune is, especially in a square, it brings a fog over things. It brings a delusional aspect over things. And so when it's squaring Jupiter, it can sort of bring out this desire to take foolish risks attached to a belief system that you might have, or an overconfidence about something that you think you can do. And so with this, that with Jupiter, and especially because Jupiter is its home sign in Justin's chart, because Sagittarius rules Jupiter, Jupiter rules Sagittarius. They're in each other's home. So this can bring out a very strong aspect of this. And so he's not seeing the world realistically. He is believing in something, and he actually might be believing that he's actually helping. But there's this delusion with Neptune squaring that Jupiter, and this eclipse will really bring this to light. So that's what's going on in Justin Trudeau's chart. I'm not sure that that's inspiring confidence in me. I think he really is, really does believe in what he's doing. But this is, it's almost like he's being fooled or being delusional, and that's really not what you want in a leader taking you forward. So now let's bring up the Canadian chart. And before I go to the Canadian chart, I just want to tell you that, very interestingly enough, last year, in March of 2020, I was in Toronto speaking at a conference, a women's business conference, and I was speaking on the first day of that conference. Justin Trudeau was the keynote speaker, and I spoke on the second day. And the person who was running this conference, I know, and she told me that Justin Trudeau had contacted them and wanted to speak at this conference. And was kind of a little bit like, what do you think? And okay, whatever. So he did come to speak. There's a focus on women in business, but also First Nations in business and Black people in business. And so I could see why he would want to attend that. It's a very political move. But I took a look at the chart of the start of that conference, and it was happening on a full moon. And that full moon, the Sabian symbol for that full moon was a caravan of vehicles. And after he had spoken, people were moving around and going into different conferences, and I had jet lag. So I went outside to get some fresh air, and I saw a convoy of vehicles, and I was like, oh my God, that's just like the Sabian symbol. And I just thought, wow, that's like so amazingly symbolic. And then I Googled what the Sabian symbol was exactly again, and it said the Sabian symbol was actually a caravan of vehicles heading west. And I thought, wow, that's super interesting, because they were definitely a caravan of vehicles heading east. And something inside of me was like, ooh, Justin Trudeau is heading in the wrong direction. That was my thought. The very next day, the day that I was speaking at the conference, his wife got ill with COVID. Actually, this was the week where things happened very rapidly. And I actually had to end my trip early and come back to the Yukon because of COVID and shutdowns. And it was just an unbelievable week. So I really, without knowing anything about what was going to transpire, that was the very first week, I was like, ooh, Justin Trudeau is heading in the wrong direction, just based on that Sabian symbol, and not heading in the right, heading east instead of west. So that was Justin Trudeau and that conference. Now let's go and look at Canada and what the Canadian chart looks like. Okay, so here's the Canadian chart. And the first thing I want to just kind of look at, because you want to make sure, okay, so this was July 1st, 1867, and I've got midnight because that's the time when the beginning of Canada would have come into being. And you can see right here, interestingly enough, oops, I did a big circle there, but Canada has Neptune in Aries right on the rising. And so I thought that was super interesting, because Canada does have this kind of weird identity problem. And Aries is all around who am I and my identity. And so there's a bit of a Neptunian feel, because it's like I can't quite figure out who I am. It's dissolved or diffused or not super clear, and that's what kind of Neptune brings into that on the rising sign, with an Aries in the rising sign. And so it made me think of the Molson Canadian commercial from back in the day, I Am Canadian, and this huge comparison. It's sort of, the commercial identifies Canada by comparing itself to the United States, basically. And so that's kind of who we are. So I'm going to bring up the transit chart now. So this is the transit chart of Canada, and this is for the eclipse on June 10th. Now, as you can see, coming in really close to the ascendant is this key looking sign here, indicates that that's Chiron, and Chiron is about to go over the ascendant, the rising, and it's going to conjunct Neptune. And so this Chiron is a bit of it's called the wounded healer, and so there's a wound that it always brings. So it's going to bring up this wound around Canada's identity, who are we and how do we define ourselves. So that's the first thing that I noticed. Now, I'm also, this chart is like I said, with the eclipse, and the eclipse is showing down here, 19 degrees of Gemini, and it's doing a couple of things. It is squaring, I'm just going to draw this. This is a square to the nodal axis. So within a couple of degrees, it is squaring the nodes. Now, the nodes represent your direction, your purpose, and as a nation, it really does kind of describe Canada's direction and their purpose as they have demonstrated it, because the North Node is in Virgo, South Node in Pisces, and that axis really talks about that helping, and Canada is that nation that goes in and sends their army, but the army comes with the, not to fight, but to have healing missions. We send our doctors, we help out in this kind of service kind of way, bleeding heart kind of way. And that's kind of coming under some fire. Interestingly enough, I just kind of, with this, I kind of went and looked and thought, I wonder what Canada has been known for in terms of health discoveries. And there's quite a few. We have some amazing scientists and doctors and so on. And Canada was involved with the Ebola in the mid 2014, 2015, I believe it was around there. And they helped develop an Ebola vaccine, which was given. The Ebola vaccine was 100% effective in stopping Ebola. Now, the other thing that is happening is that this is within degrees of our Venus, and our Venus is in Gemini. Gemini is, your neighbors and your communication and so on. With Venus, I think we are highly dependent on the United States. Venus is around money. This Venus is in the second house. So this is being impacted. I believe this is going to mean that our economy is highly impacted around this eclipse. The other thing that is happening within a couple of days, Saturn and Uranus will square. And I'll bring up that chart because it's happening on the 14th. Okay, so here, Saturn, 13 degrees of Aquarius, Uranus at 13 degrees of Taurus, and they are squaring and hitting Canada's Pluto in Taurus. So Pluto is in the first house in Taurus. Again, this is hitting the Pluto means transformation. Saturn and Uranus making a square are all about freedom versus constriction. It's this clash between this freedom and this need to change and upgrade and so on, and it is really affecting the economy. The last time we had a Saturn-Uranus opposition was the housing crisis. So when Saturn and Uranus are in an opposition or a square, we're really seeing impacts on the economy in different ways. And so this one is definitely going to affect the economy worldwide, probably hugely with Canada, with it hitting the Pluto in the first house in Taurus. Taurus is a money sign. So we're really seeing some huge impacts. So bringing this together, Justin Trudeau in a very challenged transit in his chart. The eclipse is happening in his 10th house, so this is very public. The 10th house is career. It's what you're known for. It's the public domain of your being. And when charts of leaders are impacted, they can also impact the entire nation, and we are here seeing this impacting the nation as well. Huge spending in the last year, printing money is what people have been saying. So we're about to see this really start to come to a head at this eclipse and with the Saturn-Uranus square, which is happening on June 14th. So that's my little bit on Canada, Justin Trudeau, the eclipse, and the Saturn-Uranus square. Hopefully it was informative. I think if I could offer any advice, I would, just make sure that you have some security built into your life around money and finances. Overspending is probably not advised. And hold your hats, because this will be an interesting ride. All right, take care. Thanks so much.